And we are all set to go, and I want to welcome everybody to this 1-hour webinar entitled Growing Your Business with HyperSound Clear. My name is Brian Taylor, and I'm the Senior Director of Clinical Affairs for HyperSound, and it's really a pleasure for me to be here. I'm super excited about this technology and how it can be integrated into a practice, and we're just going to go ahead and get started. The main objective over the next 45 minutes to an hour is to show you some ways that you can successfully integrate HyperSound Clear into your clinic so that not only your patients will be more satisfied with their ability to hear the television, but we also think it's a prime opportunity to grow your business, maybe capture some business that you ordinarily wouldn't be able to by broadening the portfolio of products in your office that are available to customers or patients. So there's three items that I really want to cover today while we're on the web. The first one is to really get at why HyperSound Clear, this new technology, is different and the opportunity that it provides your practice. We'll give you a little bit of details there and kind of set the context for why HyperSound should be an important part of your product portfolio. The second thing we'll talk about is how some tweaks and some slight changes you have to make in your existing patient selection process. I want to acknowledge the fact that everybody has some type of a clinical protocol, and it's important to have some type of a clinical protocol. And if you're going to successfully integrate HyperSound into it, there might be a few small tweaks that you have to make in order for that to be successful and seamless. And we'll get into that. And then finally, a real critical element of successful use of HyperSound is conducting a demonstration, because I'm assuming everybody has at least heard this technology. It's truly first of its kind, state-of-the-art technology, and it's really important that we expose this technology and demonstrate it to as many patients as possible. And it's important that we do that in a certain way in order to really for people to experience the magnitude of the technology. Let me kind of provide a little contextual information about why HyperSound should be part of your product portfolio. And it's really all about three things. These are kind of overriding factors that are touching on anyone in the hearing care industry. The first one is what I call the silver tsunami, which simply is a colorful reference to the fact that about 10,000 people per day in the United States are turning 65. That's a huge number, and it provides us with ample opportunities to work with people. As they get older, of course, they're more likely to have hearing loss. If you look at the numbers, and I'm not going to go into details here, but roughly over the next 10 to 15 years, the number of people with hearing loss over the age of 65 will approximately double. So that gives us a tremendous amount of opportunity to help meet the needs of patients as they grow older, as their hearing starts to decline. Other products other than products besides hearing aids might be complementary to your business. Along those same lines, another thing we know about the silver tsunami is that the younger ones would be considered baby boomers. And of course, most of us know that baby boomers approach any market a little bit different than previous generations. They're more likely to want to be actively involved in their health care. They're usually a little bit more savvy about what their options might be. And it's important for us to acknowledge that they want to play a more active role in what their options might be with respect to health care. Which brings me to the second bullet point on this slide. And that is, I think all of us, unless you've been living outside of the United States, know that the American healthcare system is changing pretty dramatically. And it's beyond just some of the changes that are happening within government with respect to the Affordable Care Act. The way that medicine is being practiced around the country is also changing. We're moving into what is a lot of people call a shared decision-making approach that includes the way that physicians work with their patients. And the key phrase around the changes in the healthcare, I think, to remember is what I call patient engagement. physicians around the country are being reimbursed differently now than they were a few years ago. And I think this change, if you read the literature, is going to happen at a faster pace over the next 3 to 5 years. What I mean by patient engagement is that physicians are reimbursed to keep patients healthy. It's more along the lines of preventive care. And of course, most of us in the hearing industry know that in order for a patient to successfully communicate with their physician, their nurse practitioner, whomever they might see as a medical gatekeeper, it's really important for them to be able to hear and communicate effectively. And in order to do that, of course, they have to have good hearing, which may involve some type of instrumentation. So patient engagement is the key to understanding how the changes in the healthcare system might affect us as hearing care professionals. And then finally, if you've been paying attention to the publications within the industry over the last few months, you know that there are some very important pending legislation and regulatory changes that may occur over the next 6 to 12 months. I'm referring specifically to the PCAST group in Washington. They advise the president on science and technology, and the Institute of Medicine and also the FDA. There's a very good chance that they may re-regulate the industry and create a new category of products, which again I think can be looked at as a real opportunity because it might attract a new segment of the market into our practices. And of course, that new segment that we might attract may be very interested in this product, HyperSound. So that's kind of the contextual information, and it really is a golden opportunity that I wanted to focus on over the first few minutes. I wanted to dig in a little bit to what we call the unmet need of the hearing impaired population. And this is some data, and the references, by the way, are at the end of this presentation in the slide deck. But this is really a nice way to look at, as a function of degree of hearing loss, what segment of the market may not be using amplification. What this is showing you as a function of degree of hearing loss is the percentage of Americans that have a hearing loss. What that means is at the top of the pyramid, we know that 5% of Americans with hearing loss have a profound loss. And of that small group with hearing loss, 5%, we know that 70% of them wear hearing aids or have a cochlear implant, and the other 30% choose for whatever reason to be part of the deaf culture and probably rely exclusively on sign language. So of course that market we really can't grow much more. It's a very small part of the hearing loss market, however. If you look at the middle of the pyramid, we know that about 20% of Americans with hearing loss have a loss of the moderate to severe variety. And of that group, 50% wear hearing aids or have hearing aids, and the other half do not. So there is some opportunity to grow the market from a hearing aid standpoint. And then finally, where the vast majority of patients with hearing loss reside is the bottom 2/3 or 3/4 of this pyramid. And as you can see in the slide, 75% of Americans with hearing loss have a mild to high frequency moderate type of loss. And only 10% of them possess hearing aids. So this really, I think, uncovers some of the real opportunities within the industry, especially with respect to the bottom 75%. If 3/4 of Americans with hearing loss have one that's mild to moderate, and only 10% of them possess hearing aids, maybe there's some alternative, maybe there's some complementary products or devices that might better meet the needs of this segment of the marketplace. Hopefully you're thinking HyperSound might be one of those alternatives or complementary products that can address the needs of that 90% or even the 50% in the middle. But what's really interesting is there's been some recent research that shows that there's a fairly high number of Americans that have normal audiograms, but they have self-reported communication difficulties. And I'm sure that you see these in your practice fairly routinely. I know when I practiced a few years ago, these were always kind of the head-scratcher cases where they expressed a lot of issues and challenges with hearing loss or with communication, And as you're taking the case history and completing the needs assessment, you're thinking this person might have a pretty substantial hearing loss. But then once you do the audiogram and your other testing, you find the person is in the normal range. And one study published last year in one of the perhaps the most respected peer-reviewed audiology journal, Ear and Hearing, showed that 12% of adults between 21 and 84 had this very situation with a normal audiogram and some self-reported communication difficulties. And as you'll learn a little bit later on, many of those self-reported communication difficulties are with the television at home. We're finding that that's a very important situation where people want improved hearing. And again, HyperSound would be an ideal choice for those patients that have self-reported difficulties with the television and have either some amount of hearing loss or perhaps even normal hearing. And this next slide, I think, ties into the pyramid pretty nicely, because what we found over the last few years in the research is that when people come into the office seeking help from the hearing care professional, very few of them are actually in what is called the action stage of change. And if you look on this slide, you'll notice somewhere in the middle of the stair step is the action stage of change. And really, to understand the power of this model, I want to walk through it just a little bit. The stages of change model is relatively new to audiology, but it's something that other professions that are involved with caring for patients with chronic conditions know quite a bit about. And hearing loss, depending on the study that you read, age-related hearing loss that is either the second or the third most common chronic condition among Americans over the age of 60. So of course, it's important in my mind that we study sort of the mindset or the behavior of patients that are dealing with these chronic conditions. And what this model tells us is that patients typically go through several stages of change before they take action, and then there's a few stages of change after. And why is this important? Because many of the patients that you see are not ready to take action around using hearing aids. And perhaps HyperSound would be what we would call a gateway product. So let's kind of look at the bottom of the stair step. We have the pre-contemplation stage. And what's interesting about this is I'm sure all of you have patients that you've probably seen just in the last few weeks that would fit into one of these four stages. Pre-contemplation really means the patient lacks any awareness that a problem with their hearing would exist. Their wife or their spouse might complain, but the patient is, we use the phrase, it's fallen on deaf ears. And they're blissfully in denial, and they have no intent to change because they don't think a problem exists. And there are a lot of patients that come into your office that might be in that pre-contemplation stage because somebody has dragged them in. As we move up the stair step, the next stage of change that people often move into would be the contemplation stage, where they're aware that they might have a problem, but they're really indifferent or ambivalent. They might want to know a little bit about the pros and the cons of why they should take action, but for the most part, they know the problem is there, but they're not ready to do anything about it. Sometimes not even really even interested in learning any more about it. Then we have the preparation stage, and this is where you start to see more and more patients come into your office to look at what some of their alternatives might be. This is where they're looking for information, they're looking for advice. This is oftentimes when patients finally go to the internet and do a search on some of the products that might be available to them. And essentially, when you're in the preparation stage, you're more open to information and input from others, and you're planning to do something in the near future. It could be a year from now, it could be a few weeks from now, but you're planning to do something in the relative near future. And then finally, there's the action stage, when somebody is actually ready to take action. They're ready to do something about their hearing loss. They're ready to change their behavior in reference to that hearing loss, which essentially means using a product, wearing a hearing aid. And then further down the chain, which we don't want to spend a lot of time on today, is there's the maintenance stage where people maybe relapse. For us, that might be they stop wearing their hearing aids, they stop, being good listeners, following the directives of the hearing care professional. And then there's finally termination, when somebody's a consistent user of the treatment options that we recommended. But the main takeaway from this is that patients fall into these different various stages of change. Now, I want you to think back to that slide that I talked about, the silver tsunami and the baby boomer, and I mentioned that baby boomers want to take a more active role. And for us, that really means they're typically more willing to talk to you, to go onto a website and get information. And what that means, I think, in the real world is that as these baby boomers age, you're going to see more and more patients that are in the pre-contemplation and the contemplation stage in your practice. And I would argue that those are the prime patients that you want to talk about a range of treatment options for. So I want to introduce you to this model of stages of change. I think it's really important to understanding how HyperSound can fit into your practice. And we'll talk about it probably a little bit later on as we move through the rest of the material. There is one really important study that was published about 3 years ago. This study comes from some audiology researchers in Europe, the United States, and Australia. So it's a multi-site study. It was in a peer-reviewed journal. I think it's very useful, evidence-based information. And it gets at what's called shared decision-making, because remember, baby boomers want to take a more active role in healthcare, and there's this model out there called shared decision-making, which really says patients want to know what their options are, and then that you kind of help them make a decision and guide them through the process. You can contrast the shared decision-making model, which a lot of audiologists and other healthcare professionals use, which is called the paternalistic model. The paternalistic model is simply the patient comes in, you gather information, and then you essentially tell them this is what you should do. Historically, that's worked well, but we're finding with healthy agers, with baby boomers, that's probably not the best approach, that a shared decision-making approach is needed. But the shared decision-making approach is really predicated on having alternative options or having choices. And what I've noticed in the industry over my 25 years in it is that oftentimes the only choice we give patients is around a hearing aid. And maybe we have good, better, best options. But the exciting thing about the world we live in today is that there are other technologies that might be complementary to the traditional hearing aid. So yes, hearing aids will be the bread and butter option for most of our patients, but there's going to be some opportunities, I think, to position these complementary products, and that really fits well into the shared decision-making approach. So in this study, back to the study, what's really interesting about this is they found that when patients were giving a choice other than hearing aids, about half of the patients actually chose the other intervention. So just to kind of walk through, there were 289 potential participants. So imagine 289 potential patients or prospects coming to your practice. And of that group of 289, 153 of them had a mild loss or greater. And in this study, they were considered eligible for intervention. And they were given an option. They were given 3 options in this shared decision-making paradigm. They were given the option of trying hearing aids. They were given the option of a communication program or oral rehabilitation, or they were given the option of doing nothing. And that's the 3 things they were offered, and they were asked to give it some time to think about it. And after they were given a little bit of time, the actual uptake, the ones that actually did something about it, 43% chose hearing aids, 18% chose communication programs, and 39% chose no intervention. So you can see when people were given a little bit of time, there were some more people gravitated into the no intervention bucket. But what's interesting about this is that regardless of the bucket they went into, the communication program or the hearing aids, the results were highly favorable, which kind of tells you when somebody has more skin in the game and they're able to make a decision about what they want to do, that reflects on higher outcomes. So that 93% adherence number is pretty favorable, and it's actually significantly better than if you look at studies where the only intervention was hearing aids alone. So I think this gets at why it's important to have a shared decision-making process and why it's important to look at the difference between decisions and actual uptake. So in other words, decisions are what patients are thinking about doing, and uptake is an action. And it's really important that we acknowledge the difference, and that requires clinicians to periodically reassess the needs of the patient. So for me, the takeaway is when patients come in every 6 months, we should reevaluate if they're ready to take action on another alternative or complementary solution that might enhance their ability to hear. Also, we know, as I've already kind of alluded to, is that when patients are given multiple intervention options, more than half of those patients that are seeking help in your clinic obtain something other than a hearing aid. In other words, they find these complementary or alternative options more appealing. Now, down the road, they might go and they might choose hearing aids. But the takeaway message for me is patients that need to know that there are options available for them, and it's our job to kind of guide them through the process. And I think that HyperSound would be an integral part of the shared decision-making process. So if HyperSound is a viable option for a lot of these patients when given the choice, it kind of makes sense then to look at that technology a little bit more carefully. And I know most of you probably have some experience with it, but just to kind of review, we know that the average American watches 5 or more hours of television every day. It's actually 7 hours for people that are 65 plus. So we know that watching television is an important leisure activity for a lot of individuals, especially those over the age of 65. And we also know that 61% of adults, according to one study, between the ages of 54 and 66, reported difficulty following conversations and noise. And of course, television could be categorized as that type of listening situation. So yes, there is a need, I think, to have some type of a product or a device available to fill this void. And the product that we're talking about that's really ideally suited to do that would be the HyperSound Clear 500p. Here you see an aerial view of how the HyperSound emitters are working in a typical family room with a couple. You'll notice the emitters are right next to, on either side of the flat screen TV, and the person in the gray the gray chair has the emitters pointed at each ear, and his companion is sitting there on the black sofa. She's able to watch the television with the normal volume, and he's able to listen to the television as he sits down in his chair with HyperSound. So both people can listen to the same show. There's no obstructions from other devices. And they both can be together, have conversations between the shows during the commercial, and really makes the world a better place. So that's the aerial view, which you probably are somewhat familiar with. At least I'm thinking you are. And I've already kind of mentioned that the HyperSound Clear 500p is a great way to. It's a brand new category of products, and it's a great way to attract new, younger patients. Think about that pyramid I showed you. 75% of Americans with hearing loss are mild to high frequency moderate, and a huge percentage of that group are patients under the age of 65. Those patients, by the way, if you look at the research, most of them don't even acknowledge that they have a hearing loss, or they don't acknowledge that they're a hearing aid candidate. So now you have a product for an important situation, watching television, that you can add to your portfolio that they might be more interested in using. They find it more appealing because it's not a hearing aid. We also know that there's a group of patients out there that wear hearing aids, but they want a little bit more enhancement for the television. So maybe their hearing aids aren't quite right for the TV or for a certain show, and they have other products that they might use, but they're complex, they're a little bit hard to use. HyperSound is a great complementary product for those happy hearing aid users that want a little boost for their favorite television shows. And then finally, it's not shown on this slide, but another group of patients I want you to think about as really, I think, prime candidates would be those patients that are, I call them the advanced elderly, patients that are typically over the age of 80. They're more likely to have cognitive issues, Alzheimer's, dementia. Those are the kinds of patients, by and large, 80–90% of them, according to the literature, have some degree of hearing loss, and many of them have worn hearing aids, but they forget them. They can't get them in their ear, and it becomes a real nuisance for them to be consistently wearing hearing aids. And by the way, a lot of those patients still they enjoy television with their family. Sometimes they're a little bit more housebound than average, and I would say HyperSound is a prime solution for that group of patients as well. Either way, as people age, we know they're more likely to become traditional hearing aid candidates, so why not think of HyperSound as a gateway product? You can get involved in the delivery of a customizable product earlier in the stage of change for a very specific listening situation, that is the TV. So that's kind of an idea of who the prime candidates are. Just to give you a little bit more information, we know that HyperSound has got some evidence behind it to kind of back up its validity. One study that was published, I think this was in October of last year in the Hearing Review, this was a patient preference study. Results were extremely favorable. We conducted research in 2 separate practices, and we found overall that just under 70% of the participants rated the audio experience very good to excellent, which is like an 8 or a 9 or a 10 on a 1 to 10 scale. And 79% reported that speech intelligibility was markedly or tremendously improved. So again, these early patient preference studies are incredibly, I think, positive early indication of the validity of HyperSound. So we're about halfway done, maybe a little bit less than halfway. And I can certainly save questions to the end, but what I wanted to really focus on now is how you would integrate HyperSound Clear into your existing clinical protocol. And as I mentioned early on, I think, and I want to acknowledge, I think everyone has some type of a clinical protocol that they use, and I think we all understand the importance of that. And maybe just a little bit of tweaking is needed to successfully integrate HyperSound into your existing protocol. We've broken this down into 5 steps or 5 places where you can weave HyperSound into what you're already doing. And you see those 5 things listed here on the slide. There's a few things that you would have to do just a little bit differently during the appointment booking, a few things to do differently during identifying the need, validating the patient need, demonstrating HyperSound, and then finally gaining agreement. So we've done I think, I'm not going to take any credit for this, but we have a team of professionals and experts here that have done just a fantastic job of putting together some turnkey tools that will be available to you to help you through this process. So let's talk about the first one, appointment booking. And what I'm going to show you is really specific to when you do what we call a demonstration day. So we encourage anybody that's a HyperSound account to do a demonstration day with their HyperSound representative. And if you're going to do that, it's important when you send out the marketing pieces and people start calling you back that you use the proper language to book those appointments. So I'm not going to read this verbatim. The main teaching point here is if you're going to do a mailer, and people start calling back, it's important that you coach your staff on how they would address some of the common questions. So here, one of the questions that you would maybe have the front office person ask is, are you finding that the television is a challenge? And then some of the possible responses. The one thing I really want to call out on this slide is you want patients to come in on a scheduled time for a 30-minute demonstration. We're finding in some of our early work that if we don't schedule at least 30 minutes, we're sort of shortchanging the patient. They're not able to fully be immersed in the 3D spotlight of sound provided by the HyperSound unit. Some other things to think about when you're booking the appointment. One of the common questions that you might get from a patient would be, I received the mailer, how much does HyperSound Clear cost? Just like you would with hearing aids, we think it's important that you provide a range of possible costs. And the range you see here really reflects the fact that you might have ALDs and you might have lyric extended wear products in your practice. So you see the range is quite large, and you might modify that somewhat depending on the products that are available in your practice. But it's important to talk about it as state-of-the-art technology. It's important to talk about the fact that you want them to come in for a 30-minute demonstration. So again, the main takeaway here is coach your front office staff on using the proper language to successfully book the patient a 30-minute appointment and to clearly and accurately answer their questions. Let's move into the second one, which is identifying the patient need. A more clinical term that I use would be triaging, which is really sorting out patients and deciding who's really a prime candidate for traditional hearing aids and who might be a prime candidate for HyperSound. We've actually come up with some tools to help you, some visuals that I think are pretty powerful kinds of visuals that you can use to walk people through the process. So we recommend that you use whatever existing intake form that you don't really make any major changes. When I talk about intake form, I'm talking about the COSI. That's a very common one. Another one is the Telegram. And those are essentially forms where the patient can, with your help oftentimes, nominate up to 5 different listening situations that you target for improvement. So continue to use the COSI or its equivalent if you still have it. You also might want to think about using some type of a questionnaire. Some of you might be familiar with the Hearing Handicap Inventory for the Elderly. That has been around for about 35 years, and it's very common. One that we recommend, if you're not using a questionnaire at the moment, is here on the slide. It's called the Patient Assessment of Communication Abilities. And the main idea here is while the patient is waiting to see you, they can fill out this very brief questionnaire. It's on a 5-point scale from no difficulty to very much difficult for a number of common listening situations. Anything from one-on-one conversations to restaurants to watching television. And then you'll notice at the bottom there's a place where the patient can rank order their 3 most challenging or important listening situations. So if you're not already doing something like this, we encourage you to do this because this is a great way to get information from the patient in their own words on using a scale. And it's a great way to have a early conversation or early dialogue with the patient about when some of their priorities might be. So back to the slide I've already shared with you. One thing you can do is sort of relate the information from that intake form to what the patient's priorities might be. And you'll see there's a schematic here. What situations do you have trouble hearing in? One of the tools we've created has this on it, and it's a nice way to kind of get from the patient which areas they're having the most amount of difficulty. And the visual is a nice way to do that for, I think, some obvious reasons. And that's a nice way to do what I call triaging or sorting patients to find out what their priorities might be. Simply ask the patient, tell me more about these situations that you might be having difficulty in. Which one of these do you want to focus on first? And of course, you get that information from the COSI and a questionnaire like this. Once you've identified and prioritized the need, then it's important to provide some validation, or maybe what we would call reassurance, moving on to the next step. So I think most of us that have worked in this business we think of the sales process really as a series of next steps. And the next step here is to kind of gain agreement for the patient that you want to validate their need. So once you've prioritized, that's a good time to ask some probing questions about the challenges they might face with the television, and if other people in the family are complaining that the volume is too loud. So of course, those are the kinds of questions you would ask if television is a really high priority. Because again, I think the main point of all this is sorting the patients that really want to focus on television as a solution where you can demonstrate HyperSound, versus sorting patients into another bucket where they might be better off starting off with traditional hearing aids. For me, the real exciting thing is now you have some options. Not everybody turns into a hearing aid candidate. You actually have some complementary products that you can position. So we've developed another tool that helps you kind of walk a patient through what the spectrum of hearing solutions are available to them. So you'll notice here on this schematic, we have non-custom solutions and custom solutions. And the main idea here, if you think back to that shared decision-making model, is to kind of educate the patient on what all of their options might be. And some of these options you may not even have in your practice, and that's okay, because remember, baby boomers and healthy agers probably know this stuff is available anyway, so it's important that we acknowledge that. But the way that you would validate is to sort of show the patient we have non-custom solutions and we have custom solutions. Here are the pros, here are the cons. Which ones have you tried? Which ones do you know about? Which one do you want to start with? Those are some of the questions that might work depending a little bit on the situation and what the needs assessment told us. But this is a really handy tool, I think, to educate patients, show them what their options are, and really helps you set the agenda around what the patient wants to focus on. Rather than us telling them what to do, the patient kind of sets the agenda and we follow their lead. So some of the key phrases you might want to use with that spectrum of hearing solutions is at the bottom of this slide. You might say something along the lines of there are two categories of hearing solutions. The first is the non-customizable solutions. These are, have very specific function, inconsistent or uneven sound quality. They're not really adjusted by the professional, but they can be used in a very specific situation. And then we have higher end customizable solutions that have optimized sound quality that can be used either in specific listening situations like HyperSound, or can be used throughout the day like traditional extended wear and daily wear hearing aids. So I find that this tool is really helpful to kind of help set the agenda from the patient, get from their perspective where they want to start and what they might know. And I've already kind of talked about some of these things on this slide. This is another talk track that you can use for validating the need. And the whole idea here is to figure out, are you going to start by talking about HyperSound and demonstrate it, or are you going to go down the path of traditional hearing aids? And if you're finding that if you're sensing that a patient is not ready to use hearing aids, this is the time of the appointment where you want to start positioning HyperSound as a great alternative that they should demonstrate in your office. Once you've sorted out the patients that need to be demonstrated based on their priorities and their needs, the next step would be to conduct a wowing demonstration of HyperSound. And rather than going through every little point on these 9 steps here, I just want to give you a summary of what this slide is saying. What it's saying, it's really important to offer a well-designed demonstration that lasts, several minutes if necessary. So there's there's a basic step around setup and getting everything programmed properly with the amplifier, which is all listed here around Personal 1 and Personal 2. We think it's pretty important that you enter the patient's audiogram into the HyperFit software prior to conducting the demonstration. And if you don't know how to do that, let me know or your HyperSound representative, and we'll make sure that you know how to do that. That you use the proper clips to demonstrate the sound quality. You see some of those listed there under number 5. And that you compare the HyperSound audio to conventional audio so patients see the difference. And certainly if you have access to YouTube with a Wi-Fi connection in your practice, we would recommend whatever the favorite show is of your patient, dialogue from shows with English accents or movie dialogue where there's some sound effects in the background. It's a great way to show off the speech clarity feature. So when you get a moment, take some time to go through this slide carefully and make sure that you're setting the demonstration up properly so you get that wow effect from your patient. You don't want to shortchange the time spent doing the proper type of demonstration. And of course, once you've gone through that demonstration that allows the patient to experience the wow effect, then it's important to transition into gaining agreement to purchase the product. And you see on this slide, we have a couple of different key phrases that you can use to gain agreement with the patient. The main one is, would you like to bring it home today after they've experienced the demonstration? Another that we're finding effective is kind of giving the patient a little bit of, maybe it's reducing the risk a little bit, and that is letting them take HyperSound for free for a couple weeks. And if it's not working out after 2 weeks, you can simply return it. Would you like to give it a try? So that's a nice way to sort of mitigate the risk involved with trying this brand new state-of-the-art product without them feeling pressured to buy it. Because I can tell you firsthand, if it's installed properly, it would be very surprising to have more than a few returns. The product is phenomenal, as most of you know. So just to kind of wrap things up here very quickly, I'm going to go through at a very high level how we onboard new clinics that sign up to be a HyperSound provider. As I've already mentioned, it's really important to do a demonstration day. And prior to the demonstration day, of course, you want to make sure that everyone in your clinic has been properly trained, that the demonstration has been set up properly, that your front office staff or whomever is answering the phone has been coached on how to answer questions properly and how to book a patients for that 30-minute appointment. So there's some things that happen early on when we onboard new clinics that are using HyperSound for the first time. And you see some of those listed here on the slide. Like I've already mentioned, getting the front office trained on with their role, making sure that the office workflow is not disruptive, that it flows nicely and works with what you're already doing, what's already existing in your practice. As actual kind of how we sell the kickoff selling day. You notice here we've created some marketing collateral that you can use to tap into your database. And I think there's a web portal where some of these tools that I'm referencing are located. I think it's HyperSoundHearingSolutions.com, where you can find a lot of the tools that we've already talked about. So I'll let you kind of review some of these things in handout form later on, but just rest assured we've created a very, I think, effective, a very sophisticated process for how we want to get HyperSound integrated into your practice with education, marketing, and a demo day. So these are the things that happen the day after the demo day. It doesn't end. It's not the end of the relationship. We've created a series of steps after the demo to make sure that things are very successful. Even taking it to the level here where you see a 12-week onboarding plan summary. You'll notice here it's got the different stakeholders, the front office staff, the clinic owner, the HyperSound representative. It looks at the different target markets that you're going after, tested, not sold, new patients, or hearing aid owners, or hearing aid wearers. So again, spend some time going through the details of this. The main takeaway is that we've mapped out, I think, a pretty elaborate process to ensure that HyperSound is successful in your practice. At the end of 12 weeks, there's a review. The idea here is sort of like a business review, a 30-minute meeting with the owners to make sure that things are working well, that there's if there's any changes to the existing protocol and how it's marketed or how it's integrated into your practice, that we account for that, because we recognize that every practice is somewhat unique in the way that they might work with patients, and we want to acknowledge that, and we have enough flexibility within our protocol to do that. So I think I've done a lot of these webinars, and anything more than about 45 minutes becomes kind of overkill. So I just wanted to kind of summarize by focusing on a couple of key take-home messages here. And the first one, again, is related to the pyramid that I showed you, related to the shared decision-making process, and that is that it's a really exciting time right now because there's other products out there that are been validated that can really help us expand our breadth of service by offering complementary and alternative devices. You know, HyperSound being one important one. So I can't, as a fellow hearing care professional who has 25 years of experience, I can't emphasize enough how important it is as the market changes to have HyperSound as an integral part of your product portfolio. I really think it's a game changer. It's a great way to open doors. It's a great way to complement your existing business. And I think a byproduct of all that, of course, is you help more patients and you grow your own revenues and profits. So it's an exciting time right now, but it does require it requires a little bit of diligence and hard work on everybody's part to make sure that they're integrating this into the office, because just like anything else, HyperSound doesn't sell itself. We have to do a few things in our office to make sure that it's successfully integrated. So with that, I am going to turn it over to the attendees and see if there's any questions or any discussion points that any of you might have. You can type those out in the chat box. And I see one question already from Elizabeth, and her question is, what if more than one person in the family needs the device? Well, the simple answer to that is then you could buy two devices and they could each have one of their own, but that's probably not very realistic. One thing you could do is it's a programmable product. It's programmable like a hearing aid. It has multiple memories like a hearing aid. So using the remote control on your HyperSound device, for personal 1, you could set it for one person's hearing loss, and for personal 2, you could have it for the other. So now, of course, the disadvantage of that is they'd have to be listening to watching TV individually, and that may not be so good. If they want to watch television together, you could program one emitter for one person and one emitter for the other, and you narrow the beam, but that might be one workaround. So there are some ways that you can do it. I think with the programmability of the product and the fact there are two emitters, you can handle a lot of those sort of unique situations. So Elizabeth, I hope that answered your question. Does anyone else have any questions? I'm going to type in my email. So if anybody wants to send me a question offline, they can certainly do that. So feel free to email me if you'd like. And since I'm not seeing what I see, yeah. So Elizabeth, I think yeah, HyperSound is a great way to maybe foster a closer relationship with the couple. Now they have to sit on a love seat together much closely. So maybe one of the byproducts of HyperSound is we help with spousal relationships because they now have to sit closer to both be in the beam. So that'd be a great byproduct if that was the case. Yeah, and as far as the first step, I think the first step would be booking an appointment. That's one, every office does things somewhat differently. So I would encourage you to get with your rep to develop a protocol around that first step. Go back and review the slides and some of the key phrases on those slides. I think that will be helpful. The main point around booking an appointment is to make sure that you're giving patients a range of prices, and you're really strongly encouraging them to come in and have a demonstration of the state-of-the-art technology, and that it's going to take about 30 minutes to get through that demonstration. And finally, the last thing that I want to sort of reiterate is we have a website, HyperSoundHearingSolutions.com, where the tools that I talked about today will be available within, I think it's a link called the professional page. So look for that professional page link and you'll see a lot of the tools that we talked about today. Certainly feel free to email me or take a look at the slides and get back to me. We're there to help you out. We want to make sure this is as seamless and as successfully integrated as possible. And I'm just waiting to see if there's any other questions. We have quite a group on here, 25, so somebody might have one or two questions. So I'm not seeing any. Everybody gets it. Hopefully you all have it set up in your office. You've been demonstrating it. I'm hoping we just give you a little bit more of a few tips here and there to make it more of a seamless flow within your practice. All right, since I see no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and I'm going to wish everybody the best. Like I said, not a more exciting time than now to be in the hearing care profession, and we're happy that all of you have decided to stake a claim with HyperSound.